So use complete the square to rewrite the equation as the equation of a hyperbola. First thing I want to do is separate the x's and the y's. So I have 4x squared minus 40x. So there's my x terms together. For the y terms, I have negative 3y squared minus 24y. Now, right here, because we're talking about hyperbolas, order matters. Notice that the x, the coefficient of my x is positive, but the coefficient of my y is negative. That's how I know that the x is going to be first. And that helps me determine whether it's east, west, south, north. And the reason is because the x is positive. If the y were positive, the x were negative, these would be flip-flopped. I would have the y first instead. Okay, and finally, somewhere way over here, I'm going to have negative 92 equals 0. So that's the first thing that I'm actually going to deal with, is that negative 92 equals 0. Eventually, I want this whole thing equal to 1. So that 92 dangling out there really doesn't help me. So I'm going to change this to, if I add 92 to both sides, this is going to equal 92. So that side's ready. Now over here with the 4x squared, I want to have x squared by itself. So I'm going to factor out the 4. And that leaves x squared I have to factor the 4 out of everything, so I've got minus 10. X. Don't forget your variable, right? So then when I deal with the negative 3, I get my y squared. Remember, I'm dividing the negative 24 by negative 3, so I get a positive 8 here. So plus 8y. And all this is equal to 92. Now, what I actually need inside of parentheses is a perfect square trinomial. So I know I have my 4 in front, and there is x squared minus 10x. But the last thing is, I take half of that negative 10, I get negative 5. When I square it, I add 25. And now I have a perfect square trinomial there. Next, I do the same thing with the y's. So I still have my negative 3 in front. So there's y squared plus 8y. And then I take half of this 8 and I get 4. And when I square that 4, I get a positive 16. So at first glance, the assumption is that I'm adding 25 to this equation. But be careful. There's a 4 out in front. So really, this is 4 times everything inside parentheses. So I'm not just adding 25, I'm adding 4 times 25. So I actually have to add 100 to the opposite side to account for the 4. Now, the same idea implies with the y's. I'm not just adding 16 here. And this is even more confusing because I've got a negative 3 in front. So negative 3 times 16 is actually negative 48. So I'm really taking away 48 from this side because negative 3 times 16 is negative 48. So I have to do negative 48 to the other side as well. So when I combine these, I have 92 plus 100, 192, minus 48 is actually 144. And now I'm ready to break down these perfect square trinomials. So my first one, I still have my 4 in front. So I've got 4 times x minus 5 quantity squared minus 3 times y plus 4 quantity squared equals 144. Now, I know that if it's an ellipse, my equation needs to be equal to 1. So I have to divide 144 by 144. But if I do that to this side of the equation, I have to do it to both things over here as well. So I'm going to take this term, divide by 144. I'm going to take this term, divide by 144 as well. Now I can simplify my equation of the ellipse. So 4 divided by 144 is actually 1 over 36. So I have the quantity x minus 5 squared over 36. Minus y plus 4 quantity squared over 48 equals 1. Now, one last step I need to consider is I want to write these as squares. So instead of using 36, I want to convert this to just 6 squared. For the next one, instead of 48, I want to write this in simplest radical form. So I know that 16 times 3 is 48, so I'm going to do 4 radical 3 and put all that in parentheses and square it. And this is my equation of an ellipse, or of a hyperbola, ready to go into my graphing calculator. So now I can minimize a little and actually fill out the rest of our information. So first thing, is it east-west? Is it south-north? This is actually east-west because x comes first. The center, I just have to look at my numerator. The opposite of -5 is 5. The opposite of 4 is -4. So my center is 5, -4. And then I can take all this information, put it in my graphing calculator, and graph my hyperbola.